The ships came without warning on a Tuesday morning. 12 massive vessels appeared in Earth's orbit, each one larger than any city on the planet below. They hung in the darkness of space like mountains made of metal, blocking out the stars behind them. Their hulls were covered in strange symbols that glowed with pale blue light. The people of Earth looked up and saw shadows passing across the sun. In Geneva, the United Nations Space Council gathered in emergency session. The great circular chamber was filled with nervous whispers as representatives from every nation took their seats. They had prepared for this moment for 15 years, but preparation and reality were very different things. Secretary General Amara Okonkwo stood at the central podium. She was a tall woman with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen many crises. But even she felt her heart beating faster as the main screen flickered to life. The face that appeared was not human. Ambassador Vorix Thane of the Sithari Dominion looked like a reptile that had learned to stand upright. His scales were deep green, and his eyes were yellow with black slits for pupils. He wore robes of silver and gold that marked his high rank. When he spoke, his voice was smooth and practiced, like someone who had given the same speech many times before. "People of Earth," Thane said, "I bring greetings from the Galactic Tribute Authority. You have been observed, you have been measured, and now you have been found worthy of joining the greater galactic community." A murmur ran through the chamber. Some representatives smiled with relief. Contact with alien life, and they came in peace. Perhaps this would not be so bad after all. Thane continued, "As a newly recognized species, you are entitled to the protection of the Tribute Authority. Our fleets will guard your system from threats. Our technology will be shared with you in time. Our markets will be open to your traders." Secretary General Okonkwo leaned forward slightly. She knew what was coming next. They all did, though most in the room had not been told the full truth. "In exchange," Thane said, "Earth will provide tribute, resources, manufactured goods, and a small percentage of your population for labor assignments. The exact amounts will be calculated based on your planetary output. This is the way of the galaxy. This is how civilization functions. This is not negotiable." The chamber exploded into chaos. Representatives shouted at each other and at the screen. Some demanded to know more about these labor assignments. Others called for immediate surrender, arguing that they could not fight against such advanced technology. A few brave voices called for resistance, though they did not know what form that resistance could take. Okonkwo raised her hand, and slowly the room fell silent. "Ambassador Thane," she said, her voice steady, "I have some questions before we can respond to your generous offer." Thane's eyes narrowed slightly. Most species did not ask questions. Most species simply agreed, grateful that they had not been destroyed outright. But he was patient. Humans were new to the galaxy. They would learn. "You may ask," he said, "how many species are currently paying tribute to your authority?" 347 active member species. "And how many species have refused to pay tribute?" There was a pause. Thane's tongue flickered out, tasting the air in what might have been confusion or annoyance. "No species refuses tribute. It is not done." "But if one did refuse," Okonkwo pressed, "what would happen?" "Such a species would be declared rogue. They would be cut off from galactic trade. They would be hunted and punished until they understood their place in the natural order." Thane leaned closer to the camera. "But this is a foolish question. Your world has no fleet. Your weapons are primitive. You cannot refuse?" Okonkwo nodded slowly. "I understand. And these labor assignments, where do the workers go? What do they do? Do they ever come home?" Another pause. Longer this time. "They serve the greater good of galactic civilization," Thane said. "That is all you need to know." "I see." Okonkwo looked down at her hands for a moment, then back up at the screen. "Ambassador Thane, on behalf of the United Nations and the people of Earth, I must respectfully decline your offer." The silence that followed was absolute. In the chamber, representatives stared at their Secretary General with shock and horror. On the screen, Thane's yellow eyes went wide. "You decline?" He spoke the word as if he had never said it before in this context. "You cannot decline. This is not an offer. This is the way of things." "Nevertheless," Okonkwo said, "we decline. We will not pay tribute. We will not send our people to serve as labor in unknown places. We will not accept protection that we did not ask for and do not want. Thane's scales seemed to darken with anger. You do not understand what you are doing. The Tribute Authority has crushed species far more advanced than yours. We have ended civilizations that refuse to cooperate. Your little world could be turned to ash in a single day. Perhaps, Okonkwo said, but it would still be our ash, and we would still have said no. For a long moment, the ambassador simply stared at her. Then something strange happened. He laughed. It was a dry, hissing sound that held no warmth. I have dealt with many primitive species, he said. Some begged, some threatened, some tried to bargain, but none have ever simply said no and meant it. You are either very brave or very stupid, Secretary General. Time will tell which one, Okonkwo replied. Indeed it will. I will give your species one standard month to reconsider. Consult with your people. Let them understand what awaits them if they persist in this foolishness. When I return, I expect a different answer. He paused. For your sake, I hope I receive one. The screen went dark. The chamber erupted again, but Okonkwo was already walking toward the exit. She had preparations to make. The real work was about to begin. 3 hours later, she stood in a bunker deep beneath the Swiss Alps. The room was filled with screens showing data that most of humanity did not know existed. Star maps, ship designs, communications logs, 15 years of secret preparation. Admiral Chen Weilin stood beside her, a small woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for speaking her mind. They'll be back in a month, Chen said. Our defenses are ready, but I won't lie to you. We can hurt them. We cannot beat them in a straight fight. We're not going to fight them straight, Okonkwo said. We're going to fight them the only way that matters. She pressed a button, and a new face appeared on the main screen. It was not human, but it was not Sithari either. This being looked like a cross between a spider and a praying mantis, with too many eyes and limbs that moved in unsettling ways. But its voice, translated by computer, was warm and eager. Secretary General, the being said, I watched your response to the Sithari. I must admit, I did not believe it would happen. After all these years of waiting and hoping, someone finally said the word we have all dreamed of saying. Elder Vizix, Okonkwo said, the Morthani are still with us? We are, and not just us, the Calorians, the children of distant suns, the scattered remnants of a dozen species the Authority calls pacified. We have been watching humanity for 15 years, since you found Kethvor's ship. We have been waiting to see if you were the ones the prophecies spoke of. Admiral Chen stepped forward. What prophecies? Vizix's many eyes blinked in sequence. There is an old story, Admiral. It says that one day a species will rise that is too stubborn to kneel, too clever to be crushed, and too kind to become what it defeats. We have waited a very long time for that species. We believe it might be you. That's a lot of faith to put in beings you've never met, Chen said. We have met one, Vizix replied. Kethvor of the Veloxy was the greatest of us. She gave your people everything, our histories, our secrets, our hope. She died believing that you would use those gifts wisely. I choose to share her faith. Okonkwo nodded. Then let's make sure her faith was not misplaced. How many ships can your alliance provide? Not enough to match the Authority fleet, but enough to cause confusion, enough to make them question who their enemies really are. Vizix leaned closer. And we bring something more valuable than ships. We bring knowledge. The Authority has spent centuries erasing the truth about what they have done. But we remember. And now, thanks to Kethvor, you have access to their own records that prove it. The archive, Okonkwo said. Yes, every crime, every betrayal, every genocide they tried to bury. It is all there, waiting to be shown to a galaxy that has been lied to for generations. Admiral Chen looked at the Secretary General. You're not planning to beat them with weapons. You're planning to beat them with information. Weapons can destroy a fleet, Okonkwo said. Information can destroy an empire. She turned back to Vizix. 1 month. Can we be ready? We have been ready for 300 years, Vizix said. 1 more month is nothing. As the connection ended, Chen shook her head. This is insane. We're about to pick a fight with the entire galaxy based on the word of bugs and spiders and the dying gift of someone none of us ever met. Okonkwo smiled. It was a tired smile, but there was iron beneath it. Kethvor crashed on Europa alone and dying. She could have given up. Instead, she spent her last years teaching us everything she knew, trusting that we would do the right thing with it. I will not let her down. And if this doesn't work, if they just destroy us anyway, then we will have died free, Okonkwo said, and the galaxy will know that at least one species had the courage to say no. Outside, the stars continued their slow dance around a small blue planet that had just changed everything. The month passed faster than anyone expected. On Earth, the news of alien contact had spread within hours of the Sithari arrival. Governments tried to control the story, but there were too many satellites, too many telescopes, too many people looking up at the sky. The truth could not be hidden. Aliens were real. They wanted tribute, and humanity had said no. The reaction was not what the Sithari had predicted. Ambassador Thane had expected panic. He had expected riots and governments falling and desperate messages begging for mercy. That was how it always happened. Primitive species learned quickly that resistance was impossible. They broke themselves against the reality of galactic power and then crawled back asking what tribute they could pay to make the pain stop. Instead, humanity did something strange. They got angry. Not the hot, foolish anger that burns itself out in days. This was a cold anger, the kind that builds walls and forges weapons and makes plans that stretch across years. Factories that had been idle roared back to life. Scientists worked in shifts around the clock. Old enemies put aside their differences because suddenly those differences seemed very small compared to the threat above. And in secret bases scattered across the planet and its moons, the real preparations continued. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of Fortress Luna, humanity's hidden military headquarters on the far side of the moon. The base had been built over 15 years, disguised as a series of mining operations. Now it hummed with activity as officers monitored screens showing Earth's secret defense network. The orbital stations are at 90% readiness, a young officer reported. All weapon systems are online. The shield generators are charged. Chen nodded, but her eyes were on a different screen. This one showed the edge of the solar system, where long-range sensors had detected movement. "They're coming early," she said. Secretary General Okonkwo stood beside her, watching the same screen. "How early?" "3 days, the fleet just entered sensor range. 500 ships, maybe more. They're not even trying to hide their approach. They want us to see them coming." "Intimidation," Okonkwo said. "They still think we'll break." 500 ships. Chen's voice was flat. "We have 32 orbital defense stations and about 100 armed vessels. Even with everything we built, we can't match those numbers. We don't need to match them. We need to survive long enough for the real weapon to work." Chen turned to face her. "The broadcast. You really think information is going to stop a fleet that size? Information has toppled empires throughout human history. Why should galactic empires be any different? Because they have planet-killing weapons and we have angry radio signals." Okonkwo almost smiled. "The truth is more dangerous than any weapon, Admiral. The Sithari have spent centuries building their power on lies. They've erased histories, silenced witnesses, buried evidence of every crime they've committed. But we have that evidence now, and in 3 days, the entire galaxy is going to see it." The fleet arrived exactly when the sensors had predicted. 512 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's system. They arranged themselves in perfect formation, a wall of metal and firepower that stretched across millions of kilometers. At their center was the flagship of the Galactic Tribute Authority, a vessel so large it had its own gravity well. Ambassador Thane stood on the bridge of that flagship, looking at the blue dot in the distance that had caused so much trouble. Behind him, military commanders waited for orders. They were eager to begin. Crushing defiant species was what they did best. "Open a channel to Earth," Thane said. His image appeared on every screen on the planet. In homes and offices, in bunkers and command centers, humanity watched as the reptilian ambassador delivered his message. "People of Earth," Thane said, "your month has ended. I have returned for your answer." Have you reconsidered your foolish defiance? In the UN chamber, Secretary General Okonkwo stood at the same podium where she had refused tribute a month earlier. The building was mostly empty now. Many representatives had been evacuated to safer locations, but the cameras were still rolling. The world was watching. Ambassador Thane, she said, our answer has not changed. We will not pay tribute. We will not surrender our people. We will not kneel. Thane's tongue flickered with annoyance. Then you have chosen death. Your species will be an example to others who might dream of resistance. By this time tomorrow, your cities will be ruins, and your people will be— Before you finish that threat, Okonkwo interrupted, I suggest you listen to what we have to say. She pressed a button, and suddenly the broadcast split. Thane's face remained on one half of the screen. On the other half, something else appeared. It was a list of names, species names, the Veloxi, the Morthani, the Calorians, the children of distant suns, name after name after name, scrolling slowly upward. Hundreds of them, thousands. What is this? Thane demanded. These are the species your tribute authority has destroyed, Okonkwo said. Not conquered, destroyed, wiped from existence because they could not pay, or because they tried to resist, or simply because they were in the way. Lies, propaganda. Let me show you something else. The names disappeared. In their place came images, video recordings from Sathari military archives, ships firing on defenseless planets, cities burning, refugees being hunted down and killed. The footage was old, but the horror was fresh. This is the Veloxi homeworld, Okonkwo narrated. 60 years ago, they fell behind on their tribute payments. Your authority responded by sterilizing their planet. 90 billion people died in 3 days. Those records are classified. Not anymore. Okonkwo's voice was iron. We have everything, Ambassador. 15 years ago, a Veloxi survivor crashed on one of our moons. She spent her final years giving us access to your archives. Every massacre, every betrayal. Every time your authority promised mercy and then delivered death. It's all here, and right now, we're broadcasting it across every channel in the galaxy. On the flagship, Thane turned to his communications officer. Block that signal. We can't, sir. It's coming from multiple sources, relays scattered across dozens of systems. If we block one, 3 more activate. Thane's scales had gone pale. The tributary species, they're seeing this? Everyone is seeing it, sir. The broadcast is reaching every inhabited world in authority space. In the command center on Luna, Admiral Chen watched the chaos unfold. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. On tributary worlds, populations that had been quiet for generations were suddenly asking questions. Why had they never heard these names? What really happened to the species that disappeared? Were their own ancestors victims too? It's working, Chen said quietly. This is only the beginning, Okonkwo replied. She was still on screen, still speaking to Thane, but her words were meant for a much larger audience. For centuries, your authority has maintained power through fear and ignorance. You taught the galaxy that resistance was impossible. You erased the evidence of your crimes. You made people believe they were alone in their suffering. She leaned forward. They were never alone, and now they know it. On the flagship, Thane struggled to maintain control. His commanders were arguing among themselves. The fleet was made up of ships from dozens of species, Sathari vessels at the core, but the majority crewed by tributaries who served because they had no choice, or because they had believed the authority was just. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're receiving communications from ships in the fleet. They're asking if the broadcast is true. Tell them it's human propaganda. Tell them to prepare for attack. Sir, the Morthani cruiser Vindication is breaking formation. Thane spun to face the main screen. Sure enough, a mid-sized warship was pulling away from the fleet. Then another, and another. Ships crewed by the very species the broadcast was exposing as victims. Order them back into formation. They're not responding, sir. On the screen, Okonkwo was still speaking. We know there are good people serving in that fleet. People who believed they were part of something noble. We're not asking you to fight your commanders. We're just asking you to remember who you are. Remember your histories. Remember the families your ancestors lost, and ask yourself whether you want to help destroy another species that only asked to be free. The fleet was fragmenting. Not dramatically, most ships held position, but the cracks were visible now. A dozen vessels had broken away, then 2 dozen. Some were powering down their weapons. Others were simply drifting, their crews refusing orders. Enough! Thane's voice was a roar. All loyal vessels begin attack run. Destroy their orbital stations. Silence those broadcasts. The remaining ships surged forward, nearly 400 warships bearing down on Earth. Admiral Chen smiled grimly. Now it's our turn. She opened a channel. All defense stations, you are weapons free. Show them what we've built. Across Earth's orbit, platforms that had looked like simple space stations suddenly revealed their true nature. Weapon ports opened. Shield generators hummed to life. 100 human ships rose from hidden bases on the moon and the asteroids. The first Sithari ships entered weapons range. They expected easy targets. What they found was something else entirely. Human weapons were not supposed to be this advanced. Human shields were not supposed to hold against Authority firepower. Human ships were not supposed to move that fast or hit that hard. But they did. The battle for Earth had begun. And across the galaxy, billions of beings watched their screens, seeing the forbidden history of their civilization and the small blue world that had dared to reveal it. Some wept. Some raged. Some began to hope. The reckoning had started. The battle raged for 16 hours. Earth's defense network held far longer than anyone expected. Human engineers had spent 15 years studying captured Authority technology, learning its weaknesses, finding ways to counter it. They had built weapons that could punch through Sithari shields. They had developed armor that could absorb impacts that should have destroyed their ships. They had created a network of automated defense platforms that fought with precision and without fear. But they were still outnumbered 10-1. Admiral Chen stood in the command center of Fortress Luna, watching icons on the screen disappear one by one. Each icon was a ship. Each ship had a crew, people she had trained, friends she had served with. They were dying to buy time. Defense Station 7 is gone, an officer reported. Stations 12 and 14 are critical. Pull back the Yellowstone and the Kilimanjaro to cover them, Chen ordered. And tell the Darwin to... She stopped. The Darwin was already gone, destroyed 3 hours ago. Admiral, Secretary General Okonkwo appeared beside her, her face drawn with exhaustion. How much longer can we hold? 4 hours, maybe 6 if we're lucky. Chen's voice was flat with fatigue. They've taken losses too, heavy losses, but they have more ships to lose. On the main screen, the battle continued. Human ships darted between massive Authority cruisers, landing hits and then pulling away before they could be targeted. The Sithari commanders were frustrated. They had expected this to be over in hours, not days, but they were slowly grinding down the human defenses through sheer numbers. The broadcast is still running, Okonkwo said. Reports are coming in from across the galaxy. There are protests on Sithari tributary worlds. Some systems are refusing to send reinforcement ships. That's wonderful news for next month, Chen said bitterly. It doesn't help us today. Admiral, I need you to trust me. Everything we're doing here, every hour we buy, it matters. The cracks in their empire are spreading. We just need to... An alarm cut through the room. Every screen flashed red. What's happening? Okonkwo demanded. The tactical officer stared at his display. His face had gone white. New contacts, hundreds of them. They just appeared at the edge of the system. Chen felt her stomach drop. Reinforcements. The Authority had called for more ships, and now they were here. It was over. But the tactical officer was frowning. Admiral, the new ships, they're not Authority vessels. The transponder codes are... They're not in our database. Then who? A new voice cut across the communication channels. It was speaking in a language no human had heard before, but automatic translators rendered it instantly. People of Earth, this is Elder Vazix of the Morthani remnant. We told you that we would come when the moment was right. That moment is now. On the screen, the new fleet spread out. They were strange ships, built in styles that human eyes had never seen. Some looked like insects made of metal. Others resembled crystals or spirals or things that seemed to follow no logic at all. They were old and battered, many of them clearly held together by desperate repairs and stubborn will. But there were hundreds of them, and behind them came more. "The Calorian survivors stand with Earth," another voice announced. "The children of distant suns remember what was done to our fathers. We stand with Earth. The remnant of the Veloxi, long thought dead, stand with Earth. We honor the sacrifice of Kethvor. Her gift will not be wasted." Ship after ship announced itself. Species that the Authority had declared extinct. Civilizations that had been hiding in the dark places between stars for generations, waiting, gathering strength, hoping against hope that someday someone would stand up to their oppressors. That day had come. Ambassador Thane watched from his flagship as his tactical situation transformed. Minutes ago, he had been on the edge of victory. Now enemy ships were appearing from every direction, and his own fleet was in chaos. The tributary vessels that hadn't already defected were now caught between loyalty and terror, unsure which side they should fear more. "How is this possible?" Thane hissed. "These species are dead. We destroyed them." His intelligence officer shook his head helplessly. "Apparently not all of them, sir. It seems they've been hiding, waiting." "For what?" "For this, sir. For someone to show them they weren't alone." On the screen, the human Secretary General was speaking again. Her image was broadcast across the entire battlefield, visible to every ship on both sides. "Soldiers of the Tribute Authority," Okonkwo said, "look around you. Look at who stands against you. These are not human allies we called in favors from. These are your own victims, species you were told were extinct, peoples you were trained to think of as enemies. They survived despite everything your authority did to destroy them, and they came here today not for revenge, but for justice." She paused to let that sink in. "We are not asking you to betray your homeworlds. We are asking you to think. For 300 years, the Authority has told you that resistance is impossible, that every species that stood up was crushed, that the only way to survive is to serve. But here we are. Humans, Morthani, Veloxi, a dozen other species you thought were gone forever. We are standing, we are fighting, and we are not going to stop." In the Sithari fleet, more ships began to break away. Not just tributaries this time. Some Sithari captains, younger ones who had grown up on the lies and were only now seeing the truth, powered down their weapons and signaled surrender. Thane screamed orders that no one followed. His empire was crumbling around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Admiral Chen," Vizix's voice came through on a private channel. "Our fleet is engaging the Authority rear guard. We suggest a coordinated assault on their flagship. Cut off the head and the body will fall." Chen looked at Okonkwo. The Secretary General nodded. "All human vessels," Chen ordered, "form up on my position. We're going for the heart." The next hour was a blur of fire and chaos. Human ships, joined by Morthani cruisers and Veloxi fighters, pushed through the fragmenting Authority fleet. They didn't destroy every ship in their path. Many Sithari vessels simply surrendered or fled, but they carved a path straight toward the flagship. Thane knew they were coming for him. He ordered his remaining loyal ships to form a defensive sphere around his vessel, but half of them never arrived. Some were destroyed. Others simply didn't come. The crew of his own ship was divided, with fights breaking out in the corridors between those who wanted to keep fighting and those who wanted to surrender before it was too late. The final assault lasted 12 minutes. Human boarding ships attached to the flagship's hull, cutting through armored plates that were supposed to be impenetrable. Marines poured through the breaches, fighting deck by deck toward the bridge. They were joined by Morthani warriors who moved through the ship's ventilation systems, appearing from vents and shadows to strike from unexpected angles. When the bridge doors finally blew open, Thane was waiting with a weapon in his hand. He fired twice before a human stun grenade knocked him unconscious. Admiral Chen stepped over his fallen body and looked around the command center. Sithari officers stared at her with fear and confusion. None of them had expected this. None of them had been trained for the possibility of defeat. "This ship is now under human control," Chen announced. "Any officer who surrenders will be treated fairly. Any officer who continues to fight will be dealt with." She paused. I suggest you choose wisely. One by one, weapons clattered to the floor. Across the battlefield, the Authority fleet collapsed, without coordination from the flagship, without clear orders, without the certainty that had always defined them. The remaining ships scattered. Some fled into faster-than-light travel. Some surrendered. Some simply drifted, their crews arguing about what to do next. Earth was still standing. In the command center on Luna, exhausted officers stared at their screens in disbelief. The icons had stopped disappearing. Human ships were reporting in, damaged but alive. The orbital defense network was battered but functional. Secretary General Okonkwo sat down heavily in a chair. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe. "We won," someone said. "No," Okonkwo replied softly. "We survived. Winning comes next." On the flagship's bridge, Admiral Chen looked out at the debris field that surrounded Earth. Broken ships, scattered wreckage, the cost of resistance. Her communicator buzzed. It was Vizix. "Congratulations, Admiral. You have done what no species has done in 3 centuries. You have broken the Authority's grip." "At what cost?" Chen asked. "How many people died today?" "Many, but consider the alternative. How many would have died over the next century, ground down under tribute, shipped away as slaves, forgotten by a galaxy that didn't know they existed?" Vizix paused. "Today's dead will be remembered as heroes. That is more than most of our ancestors received." Chen had no answer for that. She wasn't sure there was one. Behind her, medics were carrying Ambassador Thane away. He was still unconscious, but he would wake up soon. And then the real work would begin. The battle was over. The war for the galaxy's future was just starting. Ambassador Thane woke up in a cell. It was not the kind of cell he had expected. There were no chains, no instruments of pain, no guards waiting to begin an interrogation. The room was small but clean, with a bed, a table, and a window that looked out at the stars. A glass of water sat on the table, along with a meal that smelled surprisingly good. He did not touch the food. It was obviously poisoned. That was what he would have done to a captured enemy. The door opened, and the human Secretary General walked in. She was alone. No guards, no weapons that he could see. She sat down across from him as if they were about to have a casual conversation. "Ambassador Thane," Okonkwo said, "how are you feeling?" He stared at her with cold yellow eyes. "I am your prisoner. How do you think I am feeling?" "Probably confused. Your species hasn't lost a battle like this in a very long time. The experience must be unfamiliar." Thane's tongue flickered with anger. "Enjoy your victory while it lasts. The Sithari Dominion will not let this stand. Our homeworld will send more fleets, enough to turn your planet to glass." "Perhaps," Okonkwo leaned back in her chair. "But I don't think so. Have you been watching the news from home?" She placed a small screen on the table and pressed a button. Images appeared. Crowds filling the streets of Sithari cities. Protests, riots, government buildings burning. "While you were unconscious, the broadcast continued," Okonkwo explained. "Your people are learning what their government has done for the past 3 centuries. Not just to other species, to their own people as well. Did you know that the tribute system was originally created to fund wars against your own colonies? That early Sithari rebels were the first victims of the Authority you now serve?" Thane's scales had gone pale. That's not possible. Our history, your history was written by the Authority. The real records were in the same archives we accessed. Your people are seeing them now." On the screen, a Sithari news anchor was speaking rapidly, her voice shaking with barely contained emotion. Behind her, images showed evidence that had been hidden for generations. Mass graves, forged documents, the names of Sithari families who had been erased for daring to question the tribute system. "This is a lie," Thane said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "This must be fabricated." "You know it isn't. You've seen the authentication codes on those files. You know they came from Authority archives, not human computers." Okonkwo watched him carefully. "The empire you served was built on the bones of everyone who opposed it, including your own ancestors." Thane said nothing. His claws gripped the edge of the table. "I'm not telling you this to gloat," Okonkwo continued. "I'm telling you because I need you to understand something. Humanity didn't fight this war to destroy the Sithari. We fought it because we refused to become your victims. And now that it's over, we have a choice to make about what comes next. What choice? Revenge or something better? Okonkwo stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Right now, your dominion is falling apart. The tributary species are breaking free. Your economy, which depended on extraction and slave labor, is collapsing. Your military is shattered and divided. Humanity and our allies could press the attack. We could burn the Sithari homeworld the way you burned the Veloxi. We could hunt down everyone who profited from the tribute system and execute them in the streets. She turned back to face him. Is that what you would do, Ambassador, if your positions were reversed? Thane hesitated. Every instinct in his body screamed yes. That was the way of the galaxy. The strong crushed the weak. Victory meant destruction of your enemies. Anything else was foolishness. But he had been strong. He had crushed the weak. And now he was sitting in a human cell, watching his entire civilization crumble on a tiny screen. I don't know, he admitted. Neither do we, honestly. The people of Earth are angry. They watch friends and family die defending our planet. They want someone to pay for that. And you would be the easiest target. Okonkwo sat back down. But I didn't fight this war to become what I was fighting against. And I don't think most humans did either. Then what do you want? I want to build something that doesn't require tribute. Something that doesn't need to destroy other species to survive. Trade instead of extraction. Cooperation instead of domination. A galaxy where being strong doesn't mean making everyone else weak. Thane laughed bitterly. Impossible. You cannot change the nature of civilization. The strong will always rule the weak? Maybe, but we're going to try anyway. Okonkwo leaned forward. And we want your help. For a moment Thane thought he had misheard. You want my help? The Sithari people are not our enemies. Your government was our enemy. Your system was our enemy. But there are billions of Sithari who were just trying to live their lives, following the rules they were taught. They didn't choose to be born into an empire built on slavery. Now that empire's gone, and they need to build something new, they'll need leaders who understand both what the old system was and why it failed. You want me to betray my people? I want you to save your people. From themselves, if necessary. Okonkwo's voice softened. Ambassador, I've read your file. You were born on a colony world. Your family wasn't part of the ruling class. You earned your position through hard work and skill. You believed in the system because it was the only system you knew. That doesn't make you evil. It makes you a product of your circumstances. Thane looked away. The images on the screen had changed. Now it showed Sithari children, confused and frightened, watching their world transform around them. What would you have me do? He asked quietly. Go home, not as a defeated commander, but as someone who saw the truth and survived. Tell your people what really happened here. Tell them that humans offered peace when they could have demanded blood. Help them understand that the galaxy doesn't have to work the way they were taught. She paused. It won't be easy. Some will call you a traitor, some will want you dead, but some will listen. And that's all we can ask. And if I refuse, then you'll stay here until the war is officially over, and then we'll release you anyway. We're not in the business of keeping prisoners forever. Okonkwo stood. Think about it. You have time. She walked to the door, then stopped. Ambassador, one more thing. The Veloxi survivor who gave us access to your archives, her name was Keth Vor. She died on our world, alone and far from home, trusting that we would use her gift wisely. I think about her often. I wonder what she would say if she could see us now. What do you think she would say? Okonkwo considered the question. I think she would say that the measure of a civilization isn't how it treats its friends. It's how it treats its enemies when they are no longer a threat. She left. The door closed behind her. Thane sat alone in the cell for a long time, watching the screen, watching his world burn and transform and struggle towards something new. The food sat untouched on the table. After 3 hours, he finally ate it. It wasn't poisoned. It was, in fact, quite good. Across the galaxy, the tribute authority was dying, not with a single dramatic collapse, but with 1,000 small surrenders. Tributary species declared independence. Authority installations were abandoned or taken over by local populations. The economic systems that had kept the empire running ground to a halt as the forced labor that powered them simply walked away. On Earth, the work of rebuilding had begun. The orbital defense stations were being repaired. Memorial services were held for the fallen. The Allied fleets, Morthani, Veloxi, Calorian, and a dozen others, established temporary bases in the outer solar system, sharing technology and knowledge that humanity had never dreamed of. Admiral Chen stood in the ruins of Defense Station 7, looking at the damage. The station had been hit hard, but it had held. Its crew had bought precious hours for the rest of the fleet. 53 dead, she said quietly. We've recovered all the bodies. Commander Yizhit stood beside her. The Morthani officer had requested assignment to the human fleet after the battle, one of thousands of former Authority soldiers who were seeking new purpose. Your people fought well, Yizhit said. I have served on many ships with many species. I have never seen such determination. We didn't have a choice. It was fight or die. Every species has that choice. Most choose surrender. Humanity chose to stand. The Morthani clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. When I was young, I was taught that the Authority was invincible, that resistance only brought suffering. I believed it. I served because I believed it. She paused. Watching your world fight changed something in me. Perhaps it will change others as well. Chen looked at her. Why did you join us? You could have gone home. You could have stayed neutral. Because for the first time in my life, I saw what I wanted to be. Not a servant of conquerors, not a weapon pointed at the innocent, something better. Yizet turned her many eyes toward the stars. Your Secretary General spoke of building a new kind of civilization. I want to be part of that, even if I do not live to see it finished. You might have a long wait. Change is slow. I have waited all my life already. A little longer is nothing. They stood together in silence, two soldiers from different worlds, looking out at a galaxy that was finally, painfully, beginning to change. The reckoning had been delivered. Now came the harder part, building something worthy of the price that had been paid. 6 months had passed since the battle, and the galaxy was still learning how to breathe. The Great Hall of the United Nations had been transformed. What was once a chamber for human diplomacy now hosted representatives from 37 species. They sat in sections arranged not by power or wealth, but alphabetically, a small detail that said more than any speech could about the kind of future humanity was trying to build. Secretary General Okonkwo stood at the podium, looking out at faces that no human would have imagined seeing a year ago. Morthani diplomats with their gleaming carapaces, Veloxi elders who had spent decades in hiding, never expecting to walk openly again. Calorians with their crystal-like skin that caught the light in rainbow patterns, and yes, even a small delegation of Sithari, representatives of reform movements that had risen from the ashes of their empire. 1 year ago, Okonkwo began, a fleet arrived in our system demanding tribute. They told us that this was the way of the galaxy, that the strong took from the weak, that there was no alternative. She paused, letting the silence fill the room. They were wrong. The chamber was quiet. On screens across the galaxy, billions of beings watched and listened. The Galactic Tribute Authority is gone. Not because we destroyed it, but because we showed the galaxy what it really was. A system built on lies and fear and the bones of forgotten peoples. When the truth came out, that system couldn't survive. Not because we were stronger, but because truth is always stronger than lies, given enough time. In the audience, Commander Yizhet sat beside Admiral Chen. The Morthani officer had been formally transferred to Earth's Defense Force, one of the first non-human officers to serve. She listened to the speech with all of her eyes focused on the podium. Today we sign the Charter of Free Worlds, Okonkwo continued. Not a new empire, not a tribute authority by another name. Something genuinely new, a framework for cooperation between species who choose to work together. Trade based on fair exchange, not extraction. Defense based on mutual aid, not domination. Knowledge shared freely, not hoarded by the powerful. She looked directly at the Sithari delegation. Their leader, a young female named Sareth Ko, met her gaze steadily. Sareth had been a minor bureaucrat before the fall. Now she represented a generation of Sithari who wanted something different from what their ancestors had built. We know this will not be easy. There are still factions that want to rebuild the old system. There are species who have suffered so much that they cannot imagine trusting others. There are wounds that will take generations to heal. Okonkwo's voice grew soft but firm. But we have to try, because the alternative is to become exactly what we fought against. She stepped back from the podium. The charter is open for signatures. One by one, representatives approached the central table. Each species signed in their own way, some with symbols, some with biometric seals, some with traditions that dated back thousands of years. The Veloxi elder, Kith Mar, was among the first. She had been born in hiding, raised on stories of the homeworld her people had lost. She had never expected to sign a treaty as an equal. As she touched her mark to the document, her voice cracked with emotion. Kethvor, she whispered, speaking the name of the woman who had died on Europa. I wish you could see this. Your faith was not misplaced. Ambassador Thane watched from a viewing gallery above the main floor. He was no longer a prisoner. He had been released months ago to return to his people, but he had asked to attend the ceremony. Beside him sat Secretary General Okonkwo's aide, a young man named James who had been assigned to watch him. Why are you really here? James asked. You could have stayed home. Your people need leaders. Thane considered the question. Below, species that his ancestors had oppressed were signing a document as equals. It should have filled him with shame. Instead, he felt something he couldn't quite name. I needed to see it, he said finally. I needed to see that it was real, that humans actually meant what they said. Did you think we were lying? I thought you were naive. I thought this talk of cooperation and equality was just pretty words that would fade when you realized how hard it was. Every empire says nice things at the beginning. The authority talked about protection and order and the greater good. Then they built their system on slavery anyway. Thane's tongue flickered thoughtfully. But you actually meant it. You could have crushed us when we were weak. You chose not to. You could have taken our resources as payment for your dead. You chose not to. You could have made us kneel. You asked us to stand beside you instead. James said nothing. That is harder to fight than weapons, Thane continued. Weapons I understand. Kindness from an enemy. That I am still learning. In the hall below, the signing ceremony had reached the Sithari delegation. Sareth Ko approached the table with the weight of her people's history on her shoulders. There were many at home who called her a traitor. There were assassination threats, political enemies, a whole system of power that resented her existence. But she walked with her head high. She signed. The chamber erupted in applause, not for the Sithari specifically, but for what it represented. The oppressors and the oppressed, standing together, choosing a different path. Okonkwo found Admiral Chen after the ceremony in a quiet corridor away from the crowds. The Admiral was looking out a window at the construction happening in orbit. New stations, new ships, new beginnings. We did it, Chen said. Somehow, we actually did it. We did the easy part, Okonkwo replied. The hard part is keeping it together. You don't sound like someone who just achieved the impossible. Okonkwo smiled tiredly. I've been thinking about Kethvor. She spent her final years teaching us, preparing us, giving us the tools we needed to survive. But she never got to see this. She died alone, far from home, trusting strangers with everything her people had left. She would be proud. Would she? Or would she be afraid that we'll waste it? That in 100 years the Charter will become just another empire? That we'll convince ourselves that our domination is different because we mean well? Chen turned to face her. Is that what you're worried about? It's what I think about every day. Power corrupts. Every civilization that ever built something this big eventually became the thing it replaced. Why should we be different? They stood in silence for a moment. Outside, ships from a dozen species moved peacefully through Earth's orbit. You know what I think? Chen said finally. I think the fact that you're asking that question is why we might actually make it. The authority never questioned itself. They assumed they were right because they were strong. But you're not sure. You're watching for the moment when we start to become what we fought against. And as long as someone is watching, as long as someone remembers to ask whether we're still doing the right thing, maybe we have a chance. Okonkwo considered this. That's not exactly comforting. It's not supposed to be. Comfort makes people sloppy. Chen grinned. Besides, We've got a whole galaxy full of species who will let us know if we start going wrong. That's the point of this charter, isn't it? No one species in charge. Everyone watching everyone else. In a medical center on the other side of the complex, a different kind of history was being made. The first Veloxi child, born outside of hiding in 60 years, opened her eyes and saw a room full of strange faces. Human doctors, Morthani nurses, a Calorian specialist who had traveled across the galaxy for this moment. Her name was Keth, chosen by her parents to honor the woman who had made this possible. Elder Kithmar held the child gently, tears streaming down her ancient face. "You will never have to hide," she whispered. "You will never have to pretend you don't exist. You will grow up in a galaxy that knows your people's name." The baby made a small sound, oblivious to the weight of the moment. She had no idea that her birth represented the survival of a species. She was just hungry and confused, and surrounded by strange sounds and smells. But she was alive, and she was free. That evening, humanity's broadcast network carried something new. Not evidence of crimes, not calls to action, not the urgent transmissions of war. Instead, it carried something simpler. Educational programs from 100 worlds. History lessons that told the truth. Scientific knowledge shared freely. Art and music and stories from species who had been silenced for generations. On Morthani colony worlds, children learned about human culture for the first time. On Sathari planets, young people watched documentaries about the species their ancestors had destroyed, crying at horrors they had never been taught. On hidden Veloxi stations coming out of the shadows, elders and youngsters sat together, finally able to share their history openly. It was not a perfect system. There were arguments about content, about language, about which versions of history were accurate. There were species who refused to participate, still angry, still suspicious. There were technical problems and political fights and all the messy complications of genuine cooperation. But it was real. It was honest. It was something new. Ambassador Thane watched the broadcast from his ship, preparing to return home. On the screen, a human teacher was explaining Earth's history to an audience of alien students, speaking about human wars and human failures with the same honesty that had exposed the authorities' crimes. "We have not always been good," the teacher was saying. "We have killed each other over land and resources and ideas. We have built empires and watched them fall. We have made mistakes that cost millions of lives. But we have also learned from those mistakes. Sometimes." Thane thought about his own people, about the hard road ahead of them. The Sethari had built their identity around being strong, being dominant, being the rulers of lesser species. Now they had to find a new way to be. It would not be easy. Many would fail. Many would try to rebuild the old ways. But some would succeed. Some would find meaning in cooperation instead of conquest. Some would discover that there was more to strength than the ability to destroy. He hoped he would be one of them. Outside the window, stars burned in the darkness. Somewhere out there, species who had never heard of Earth or the Authority or the Charter were living their own lives, unaware that the galaxy was changing around them. Someday, perhaps, they would look up and see ships approaching their worlds. But those ships would bring offers of trade and friendship, not demands for tribute. That was the goal anyway. The dream that a dying Veloxi woman had carried across the stars and planted in human soil. Whether it would grow or wither, only time would tell. But for now, for this moment, there was hope. Not the desperate hope of the oppressed or the arrogant hope of conquerors. Something quieter and stronger. The hope of builders. Humanity had delivered a reckoning to those who demanded tribute. And then humanity had delivered something far more valuable. A chance to build something better. The galaxy would take it from here.